Hello, Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce members. This is Drew Kamp, President and CEO of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce for our February 5th legislative update. A few big items kind of popped this week in the state legislature. I'll touch on those. Um, and those include things like broadband bill, housing bill, um, and some of the things from the Economic Recovery Task Force that was released yesterday as well. So there's some big pieces as far as our priority uh, pieces of policy and legislation that kind of dropped this week. So I look forward to kind of talking about some of those and their potential impacts. The first bill that I want to touch on is this governor's broadband bill. There was a Senate subcommittee on this bill and it's moved forward, and it's the one that's the bold $150 million over 3 years for a total investment of 450 million for broadband expansion throughout the state. What that would really look like is part of the bill is a grant program with tiered system with a tiered system within it to provide funding based on bandwidth and speed that's provided. It may be hard to get to the full $150 million appropriation for this that the governor is seeking, but she does have some funds at her disposal from the CARES Act and some other federal dollars as well that she can put towards this. And we do expect her to try to get as much funding towards this broadband initiative as possible because that's one of her priority issues, not only as a standalone issue, but also as part of Empower Rural Iowa. There's also a bill that's especially applicable to us here in Council Bluffs, being a river community and a border community. It was a flood mitigation bill. And what that bill would do is it would transition flood mitigation spending authority from just municipalities to allow counties to also use the same authority for flood mitigation and spending on that as an essential service. So that would provide some additional flexibility for some dollars for flood mitigation, which obviously in a community like ours, where we have seen floods in the last few years, that is something that would find attractive and beneficial and support that effort. There was also a really big bill. It's the housing bill is what it's being called, and it was dropped in the House and Senate this week. It passed subcommittee on Thursday, and really what that would do is it would create a housing tax credit for low and moderate income housing projects. It would increase the funding to $50 million for the workforce housing tax credit. It would double the funding for the brownfield grayfield redevelopment tax credit from 10 to $20 million and extend that through 2031. It would remove the cap for housing trust funds, and it would also provide some different things for downtown redevelopment and revitalization and some other elements as well that we think would be useful. So what we're doing right now is working with our partners in the housing community to get some feedback on that bill as to what they think those apparatuses and those pieces of assistance, how they look and how they could be utilized, and if there's any improvements that could be made, because we're obviously in support of anything that addresses housing and workforce, and especially if they compare those two together, that's something that we would be supportive of. So we are watching that bill and we are supportive of it. Another bill that came out this week is one we saw some action on is a revitalization area. And what that bill would do is it would allow cities and counties to provide an exemption to a revitalization area established by ordinance as a federal targeted area. And that exemption could begin at 100% and decrease by 6% each year until expiration after the 15-year period for improvements that cost 30% or more of the actual cost of the existing property. So there would be some cost restrictions regarding what the improvements would need to be on the given property. But if that is the case, there could be a 15-year tax exemption applied with part of that bill. And that's something that we continue to monitor, as it would be an additional tool in our toolbox to develop some areas throughout the city and the county. Another thing that we're watching and working on with our partners is there is a proposal regarding tax fees and taxing and fees up to 3% within an entertainment district. So think somewhere like the MAC area here in Council Bluffs. So if you had something that was a qualified entertainment district, you could impose on qualified entertainment spaces, whether it would be convention centers or arenas or bars, restaurants, things like that, that would qualify underneath the bill, up to a 3% surcharge for items in that district. So that's something we're watching closely. It's something that, we're undecided on right now, but obviously that could have implications on industries right now that have been hit really hard by the pandemic. So it's something we're a little cautious and trepidatious about. There's a subcommittee on that coming up next week. So we look forward to hearing a little bit more about that and learning what some other the people's stances are on that bill, and also expressing a little bit of our concern or thoughts on the impacts of something like that could have on some of those struggling industries right now, as in the midst of the pandemic. We also continue to see some additional information on tax reform. We still haven't seen a bill drop from Senator Dawson's Ways and Means Committee in the Senate, but we do know that there's going to be a mental health portion to kind of spin off mental health funding from property tax and create some new resources for funding of property tax that would not necessarily be off of the property tax rolls of the county. So that's something that would be of interest, and we would continue to monitor. Mental health is a big issue that we're all talking about right now, and the governor focused on in her condition of the state as well. So we'll look forward to getting some additional information, not only on the mental health aspects of the bill, but also how it could impact individual and corporate income tax. We want to see our corporate income tax rate go down, and also what it could do with some of the triggers for income tax as well that were put in by the 2018 tax reform bill that the legislature passed. So those are things we continue to monitor with tax reform. We know there's going to be a litany of different bills. There'll be one bigger bill that Senator Dawson and his committee put out and assess, but we also know there'll be different pieces, whether it's with the tax credits or whether it's with those triggers and all those different things to kind of address some other pieces that they will need to include in any tax conversation, but it will obviously be in the middle of that because as a business advocacy organization, tax is usually the top or one of our top priorities. Another item that I wanted to focus on as well is the Economic Recovery Task Force. That was something the governor put in place once the pandemic started, and she brought people together from throughout the state to give actionable items that could positively impact the state going forward out of this pandemic. They released some of their key tenets and proposals. It came out yesterday. And some of the key things that were included in there were things like childcare and preschool expansion, universal broadband access, workforce housing and community development, healthcare, student achievement and career readiness, manufacturing. That manufacturing 4.0 study that we've heard a little bit about is a big portion of that. And we look forward to that dropping here in the near future as well out of Debbie's office with Iowa Economic Development Authority. And also just government efficiency. Those are some things that we're very much in general supportive of those bills. That was something that we noted in our priorities, that we would be supportive of the Economic Recovery Task Force recommendations. There are some provisions within education that we would kind of watch and speak with our education partners on. Things like school choice and stuff are kind of hinted at in there as well. So while we're largely supportive of what's coming out of the Economic Recovery Task Force, we are monitoring pieces such as school choice that are within it. We are registered undecided on the existing school choice bill, and we will continue to be that way going forward. But that's something we do want to see what happens in the House with that school choice bill. But that also was a provision within the Economic Recovery Task Force. So I wanted to make sure I noted that as well, and that implications that has within all the other recommendations of that task force. A few other items that we're monitoring is really promotional play, and that's that promotional play tax that the casinos have to pay here throughout the state of Iowa. And it would be something that would be an additional revenue benefit to them if they can look at possibly rolling that back in some fashion. If there was a fiscal note released, we do need to see some information from the QSOs, which are the people who are on the ground putting together the receipts from some of those funds. And that's something we would like to see the impact on those as well. We'll work with our local partners on that. The fiscal note didn't include that. So we will look at trying to come up with some fiscal impacts and implications to the QSOs as well. And another thing that we continue to monitor, some school funding bills to drop this week. We'll continue to monitor that. That's obviously one of the biggest expenses and one of the biggest bills they need to get finalized before they can kind of move forward with some other items in the session. So we'll continue to monitor those. And then that school choice bill, which I referenced a little bit earlier, that's something that continues to linger out there. It passed the Senate. It's going over to the House. We haven't seen it taken up in the House yet. We do anticipate some things like vouchers and some of the other pieces that our supers and others are really concerned about possibly being removed from that bill. So like I said, we're undecided on that bill right now. We want to continue to be registered in that fashion so we can make sure that we can be at the conversation and at the table as we negotiate what some of those provisions may look like in the House, and then send it back to the Senate for additional consideration after changes in the House. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that's happening right now at the legislature. We continue to monitor it as best we can and continue to get the information out to our partners throughout the community and our key stakeholders. We thank them for their support, for their insight, just for some information and also just some data also that they've been able to provide us so we can effectively advocate for some of our key issues that I highlighted on earlier in the video. So I thank you for continuing to monitor and pay attention to what's happening in the policy sphere here at the state. And I hope you'll continue to watch these videos and that you'll find them useful. But also, if you have some recommendations, please feel free to reach out to me to see how we could possibly improve these. We always want to be improving things like this. So please do reach out if you have any recommendations or insight in that regard as well. We welcome both positive and negative constructive criticism. So please do feel free to do that. Well, with that, I will conclude our update, and I hope you have a very nice weekend. And thank you for your ongoing support of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce.